This is Educated Artistry. All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Educated Artistry. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Amalia, also known as Lala, to the podcast. With over 6 years of experience in the beauty industry and the wellness industry, Lala has carved her path as a licensed esthetician, a passionate wellness advocate, and a creative spirit. As the owner of Wingsthetics, she offers a diverse range of services, coaching, and courses. And I'm really excited because in today's episode, we're going to explore the journey of her journey of building confidence, fostering self reliance, and nurturing a profound relationship with oneself. And additionally, we're going to uncover the ways in which these personal developments served her and can also serve you for success in the world of entrepreneurship and especially in the beauty industry, where I feel like we are constantly comparing ourselves and putting ourselves last. So, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Lala. I'm super excited to chat with you and dive into this conversation.
Hi, I'm Lala. I've been in the industry for 6 years. I actually started lashing when I was in high school. Fun fact. I was still in high school
Oh,
when I started lashing. My brother's a barber. He owns two barber shops. So my family's kind of been in the beauty industry. So it wasn't no surprise when I started lashing. Right after high school, I went into esthetician school. And then after esthetician school, I kind of started like being a solo esthetician at first on my own. And then 2 years in, I decided to open a storefront. And then after having a storefront, I decided 2 years later to then close it down and work on my own personal wellness journey. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
okay. And you're still taking clients, right? So, are you just in like your own space now by yourself?
Yes. So I service 2 days a week now.
Oh, perfect. Same. It's kind of the best. So, was there anything that kind of sparked your wellness journey? Was it a burnout or anything that kind of happened where you're like, okay, this needs to be a priority?
Yes. So I opened a storefront in 2020, and I feel like that's kind of what we're like as estheticians. We're estheticians, we service clients, you maybe come out with a product line, maybe open a storefront. And 2 years into my storefront, I think I kind of just realized I had the product line, I had the storefront, I was living on my own. I was just kind of doing all the things I was supposed to be doing. And then I was still feeling like I was missing a part. There was something that just wasn't giving, and I remember just sitting in my car. I feel like if you're like a lash artist or just an esthetician, that 5 minutes of silence after work is everything. So I remember sitting in my car and I was like, something's gotta give. I'm not happy. Like I thought that when I got to being here, I would be happy. I thought that when I reached the specific goal, whether it be like coming out with a new product or even if it was a money goal, like I felt like when I got there, I would be happy. And I was like, something's gotta give. And then I remember I kind of just ran into my coach's page actually, and I was reading through her page and I was like, this is how I'm trying to feel. Like I am trying to feel content. I read this book actually, Radically Content, like a week later, and I was like, yep, we're dropping everything, rerouting and just restarting. And that's kind of what it was for me. I was burnt out. I worked 14 hours a day. I was working kind of like 7 days a week, and I was just like, I want more. So that's kind of where it started.
I feel that like so deep in my soul too, because I think when we enter the beauty industry, especially, there's this vision of what you should do and how your business should look, and that you should start the product line and do all the things and maybe open a salon and have employees. And that's something too where it's like, is that actually like long game what you want, you know? But I think it's hard when it's constantly something that is shown to us is like, this is what success is, when there's so many different paths of what that can be for you. And sometimes we do have to go through that. I know I have gone through that burnout and that intense emotion where I'm like, I need to look inward and like, where am I actually wanting this to go? So I want to start off too with if you can tell us what confidence means to you.
When I talk about confidence, there's two types of confidence. I feel like there's internal confidence and there's external confidence. So when I'm talking about confidence internally, I feel like it's more just your ability to keep your word with yourself, like your self reliance. When I think of being like a confident person, I feel like mostly when I started working on my confidence, it was just being able to trust myself and making decisions that were like quote unquote good for me. And so that kind of started with keeping my promises to myself, whether it was showing up to the gym or showing up to a meeting or showing up anywhere, right? Just keeping any promises that I would make to myself. Like if I said, okay, this is what I wanted to do. Sometimes like I feel like even as an entrepreneur, I'm still kind of shy. So sometimes I will like talk myself out of something. I feel like really like holding myself accountable to doing the things I say I'm gonna do. Like that's really what building confidence is for me internally. As far as external confidence, I feel like that also plays a really big role in just how I operate as a business owner. It wasn't until I started taking care of myself that I started to actually believe I was worthy of, oh, like I could have this, I could have that. Why can't I do this? It was just the little things, whether it was like, I don't know, wearing mascara, getting my lashes done, those little like things that would just make me feel better and put me in a better mood. Like something that give you that tick to just walk with your shoulders up. I feel like both of those things are really hand in hand.
I couldn't agree more, and I love that you brought up about, like, not breaking promises to yourself because that was something that I really had to work on, and the big thing was, for me, like, in my personal life, it was the gym and staying committed to that and not putting it back because it can be so easy when you've had a long day and you're just like, I'm just gonna not do that today." I was finding that whenever I was getting overwhelmed, I was saying yes to all of the wrong things, and I was saying no to myself, and whether that was taking extra clients and working late hours because I felt like I needed to squeeze everybody in. That was me saying yes to them made me say no to myself. And I think that was something that I really had to work on is why is it so easy for us to break promises to ourselves? And we're like, I don't know, it's just crazy to me. And that was something that just kind of stuck out where I was like, wow, I'm not a very good friend to myself. If a friend was treating me the way I'm treating myself, like we wouldn't be friends. So why am I doing this to myself? So I think anybody struggling with confidence is to start with keeping the promises that you're going to make to yourself and starting off with little things, whether it's like, okay, for 10 minutes in the morning, I'm going to read a book or I'm going to journal and have that be like something you're keeping to yourself. That's something that's helped me at least.
Right. I feel like another thing is I went through a season of really just wanting to build my relationship with myself was like self-preservation, being able to just give myself like it was all me, me, me. It's almost like a reset because you're so used to like, I don't know, if your friends want to go out or if like a work commitment, like, yes, we're on the go so much that it's like I really needed to hone in on like, okay, right now it's time for Amalia.
And I know you're in, like, a beautiful, healthy relationship now, so when you started your wellness journey, were you in that relationship or were you single?
I was single at the time.
Yeah, that's nice because I feel like that could be hard too if you're discovering that you need this time and then also being in a relationship can be a challenge too. So, do you feel like it made you a better partner or made it different for how you looked for a relationship by starting that journey while you were single?
Yes, I feel like it was probably the best thing I could have done because I feel like before I had really no little to no boundaries. And I feel like
Mm.
now, like I have boundaries, I'm aware of my feelings. I feel like sometimes when we're not very focused on being aware, we can sometimes often project and that will project into our
Yeah.
relationships. So it's good to know like when you need things and who do you need them from? What are you seeking? Like, can you give that to yourself? One of my favorite things that I've ever learned is to be able to, like, nurture myself through really any process that, like, if I'm having a bad day or if I had a bad day at work, I feel like whether it's previous relationships, I've really, like, been a projector. So, like, definitely working on myself prior to this relationship has helped a lot. It's definitely one of the best relationships I've ever been in, and I'm in a beautiful place myself too, so it's fun.
I love that for you, and you can, like, tell too just from, like, following you on social media, and that's something, like, that I've been in the single life for, like, a year now where I was like, "Okay, this is actually a really beautiful time to focus on myself and really put myself first," because I do think also, and you may resonate with this, I feel like in society I don't know, how old are you?
23.
23. Okay, so you're a little younger than me. I'm 29, but once you like get closer to 30, everyone's like, "Oh, when are you getting married? When are you having babies? Like, when are you doing all these things?" And I'm like, "Whoa, like, can I just be single?" Like, I was in a relationship for the majority of my 20s, so I'm like, "Wait, no, this is actually like such a cool time right now to be able to really rediscover who I am." Because even from 21 when I was in my relationship to 29 was so or 28 when we broke up was so I was such a different person, and I'm like, I haven't even gotten to know, like, who this version of my adult self is by myself, and so it's just interesting too because I feel like there's this thing in society that's like, "What? You need to get married or you need to, like, have somebody," and I'm like, there's actually I and for me, I'm excited for when I meet that person because same thing, the boundaries are stronger. I feel like the codependency won't be there as much on both sides, and I'm just excited to, even for myself, be a better partner to whoever that I meet. So, it's been great.
I love that, I love that. That's really, like, important too, because I feel like one thing that I feel a lot of people like the other day I was actually sitting down and, like, writing a list of, like, what does Amalia want? And I feel like a lot of the time my clients have been with me for years, so they sometimes forget that I'm only 23 and they'll be like, "So when are you having kids?" I'm like, "In, like, 10 years." Like, "Not yet." But that's just
Right?
the pressure of, like, when I'm like, "In a few years." So it's nice to know, like, what your own timeline looks like. I feel like that's really important.
Yeah, exactly, and for anybody that has kids younger, like, that's okay too. It's just funny when it gets to, like, especially when you get closer to 30, people are like, "So?" And I'm like, "Whoa, okay, this is crazy." So I wanna talk to you because it was funny when I was prepping for this interview with you, one of your TikToks came up, and I was like, "Oh, I wanna talk about this so bad on the podcast," because you had so many good points. And you were talking about overcoming FOMO in both your personal and your professional life. And I know that this topic resonates with so many of us because I feel like we're constantly comparing ourselves to others and having that freaking FOMO going on. And I want you to elaborate. You had asked 3 questions that you encouraged the viewers to ask themselves during that video. Can you go over what those were?
So the first question was, what can I do to embody the feeling that you're trying to reach? A lot of the times we set goals for ourselves. And this is actually something that I learned recently too, is a lot of the times when we're seeking something outside of us, like there's a big difference between what we want externally and internally. And I feel like usually when we're trying to, for example, as business owners, we're like, okay, like I want to hit, I don't know, 5K months, 10K months. Like, what are you seeking? What is the feeling you're trying to, do you want stability? Do you want comfort? A lot of the times we think, if again, if we're not, like, kind of holding that awareness for ourselves, it's more like we think we want something externally, but really it's a feeling we're trying to reach. So, that was, like, one of the questions that I asked, and then another one was, "What are you believing about yourself that makes you feel like you're not worthy of having that?" I struggled with this a lot, especially through my journey just in life really is just like I've always known how to achieve things, whether it's in personal or in business, but I've always felt like, okay, I have this and now what? Like, or I don't know if I could do that because again, my relationship with myself and my confidence wasn't really all there because I didn't feel like worthy of having that. Another thing is the person, the goal, the emotion, like when you think of what that person looks like for anybody really. So when I'm like thinking about who I wanna be. I feel like especially if you're, like, really focused on, like, self-development and stuff, when I think of I call her, like, my her, and it's like, I always just think, like, what would she do in this situation? Whenever I'm, like, thinking of a goal or a feeling I'm trying to reach, I'm like, what does she look like trying to achieve that? Like, is she stressed? Is she worried? Probably not. Like, really trying to figure out the feelings mostly all the time of what it is you're trying to feel to achieve that, and then just really aligning your actions with that.
I love that, and I love that you just said you call it, like, your her, because I think a lot of people be like, "My millionaire self," or "My most successful self," and there's some sort of, like, monetary value attached to it, and I love that it's just her because her can be different for so many of us, of what is your her. So, I love that because it made me think I have, like, a notes folder in my phone, and it's called my $1,000,000 version of my morning, like, what is my best self, what type of morning do I have? Like, what do I feel when I wake up? What do I do? What does that morning look like? But I really like that. I really like that switch of just like her because it's like I don't have to be a millionaire to have this amazing life and to be able to build something that has this type of, morning routine or morning vibe that I am striving for.
Right. I was just talking about this in a video recently where it's like a lot of us too. I feel like this happens to a lot of like, I don't know, people in business where it's just like we reach for like a goal, whether it's like a money goal or if it's like, oh, I want to buy a house, like that's the goal we're trying to get to. And I feel like even, for example, like you can feel what you feel being a millionaire and also only making 10K a month, not only,
Mhm.
but you could still feel those
Yeah.
feelings. Like it's you're worthy of it, and you're allowed to, like, I feel like that's one of the best tools that I have is putting myself in the feeling always. Like, whenever I feel like something's not giving, I'm like, "Put myself in the feeling," and then it's easy.
Yeah, I love that. I just love the idea of it doesn't have to be this monetary or this materialistic, I guess, like object or part of you in order to be happy and feel fulfilled in your life and confident in yourself too. So I love that. in the feeling and who's your her. That's amazing. So for people seeking like they're on their beginning of their journey and they're wanting to enhance their confidence and foster like healthy self relationships, what practical tips do you recommend and like where should somebody even start on this journey?
One of the most important places to start is getting clear on what it is that you want, whether it's, oh, I just want to have more time or I want to start getting ready. I want to start like figure out what it is that you want to start with and everybody's different, right? So like whether it's just choosing one new action, like it and when it comes to building habits like that too, I feel like it's harder to go all in than it is to like just pick up one more. You don't have to get rid of anything, just add it in. Add it into your what you're already doing. I feel like that really helps.
Yeah, I love talking about that with habit stacking, and that's something that I started doing too with like morning routines and stuff. And I'll just add, I feel like for me, something that when I was really wanting to dive into my confidence, especially, it was getting ready every day. And I didn't have to like get full glam or anything like that because that's just like not really the kind of person I am. Even if like on Mondays, I usually come into the salon and I'm kind of doing paperwork and like no one's, unless I'm doing a podcast recording, nobody's going to see me. But I was like, why am I not taking like 15 minutes just to like kind of make myself feel a little bit better? Like, put my hair in like a nicer ponytail than just like a bun on the top of my head. Just like those little things. And I feel like for me, it helped my confidence throughout the day because I just felt better. Even though I wasn't seeing anybody, I just felt better about myself. And that was something that for me that I started kind of doing. I'm like, okay, let's just not roll out of bed just because you're like working from home today. Let's put in a little bit of effort, make yourself feel good. So
I love that. I feel like nothing beats wearing like my favorite jeans or my favorite sunglasses, favorite lipstick. It really does put like a shift in my energy and just how I navigate through the world.
absolutely, because the days where I roll out of bed and I'm, like, running late or, whatever, and I didn't do anything, like, maybe brush my teeth and ran out the door, that it's like the rest of the day, I just feel like, "Meh, I just wanna get today over with, we'll restart tomorrow," you know? And so that's just been something that's really helped with me that I'm just like, "Okay, let's just give ourselves this extra love." And I know that a lot of people, especially if you have children, it's like there's not a lot of time in the morning. But I think if you can find 10 or 15 minutes just to, like, give to yourself, even if it's waking up 10 or 15 minutes earlier, I think it just sets up your day, like, totally different, and it has for me. So, yeah, I think it's just so important to, like, actually take that time for yourself. I know you talked, about a book that you read, but did you have any books or, like, podcasts or anything that you kind of and I know you were looking at your coach and you're like, "Oh, okay, this is what's up." But did you have anything else that you kinda dived into?
I read Untethered Soul. That was one of the books that really got me through. It got me through. It's basically a book about really just learning how to navigate the world through like the seat of self, which is being able to like observe the world from a seat of neutral space, basically. And I feel like I'm not a big reader. It's not very often I pick up a book these days, but I'm definitely really big on journaling. I feel like I'm always finding ways to go inward.
I love that. That's something I wanna get better with, like, this year because I love the idea of journaling, but I don't know what it is about, like, picking up a pen and paper that I'm like, "I don't wanna write." But I know how beneficial it is, so I need to work on that. So since you've, like, embarked on your confidence journey, what positive outcomes have you observed in your personal and your professional life?
I feel like the way that I treat myself really sets the standard on how others treat me, whether it's in business or in my personal life. And I see them hand in hand. I feel like I am my business. There's times where I am like, okay, my business is an extension of me, but I also am very aware of the way that I treat myself literally sets the standard for my life. What I am okay with and what I'm not okay with is like what people are going to be okay with. So it really, I don't want to say helps, but it makes a difference in the way that people show up for you because you show up for yourself.
That's so true. So since you do coaching and stuff, and I know you have some classes, which we're gonna talk about in a little bit, have you noticed any, like, consistent, pain points with, like, people that you've worked with when it comes to building confidence within themselves and having it translate to their business? Like, have you had something that's consistently came up in your coaching?
Something that often is a pain point for a lot of people is our people pleasing. That's a big thing, especially when it comes to setting boundaries. And I feel like when you're really working on your relationship with yourself, like setting boundaries is one of those things that you have to do unapologetically. There are ways to not be necessarily mean when setting a boundary, but at the same time, it's all about perspective. And if people benefit from you not having boundaries, then I mean, that's one in itself. So with my clients, that's one of the things that we have to really work through is just really like being a little more assertive and knowing that it's okay to have boundaries.
Yeah, that is huge. I see that a lot too, and it it's so funny because I feel like people do think boundaries are being mean. If you're like, "Hey, I don't work on Sundays," you're putting up a boundary, and I see it a lot with, like, people with their policies and stuff that either they don't have them or they don't want to actually implement them, and I'll just give an example. One of my policies is an after hours fee, even though I only take clients 2 days a week. Obviously, like, my books will fill up, and if a client needs to move or something, like, I'm always happy to adjust things when I can, but there are times where if it falls outside of my regular business hours, then an extra $25 charge comes along with that, and that's something that whenever I tell people that I work with, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I could never, like, how I couldn't make them pay me more, for doing the same service," and I had it this morning where I had a client, she needed to move and stuff, and I was able to come in on a day that I don't usually work, and it was just as simple as being like, "Hey, I would love to get you in. I can get you in this Thursday, and there will be an additional $25 charge because it's outside of my hours, or I can get you in on October 23rd when my next opening is or whatever. Just let me know what you decide." She was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'll see you Thursday." No questions asked. And it's like, that's not being mean. It's giving I always say to give them options too, especially when it comes when you're dealing with clients and trying to set, your boundaries and everything like that. But it's not being mean, and like you said, that sets precedence on how people are gonna treat you. My clients knowing that if they have to move their appointment last minute, then they probably are gonna have to pay extra in order to get in with me in the time that they want. So, now, it's like clients almost give me too much notice when they when they have to change things. They're like, "That appointment in 3 months, yeah, I'm gonna be out of town. I'm so sorry. I hope you have something." And I'm like, "No, it's totally fine." But it does. It does set precedence on, like, how they're going to treat you, and that does go it goes hand in hand with, like, the personal and the business stuff too. But, yeah, it's funny that that kinda happened this morning. I'm like, "That's a perfect example of a boundary."
I love that. But it too also when people see your value when you like set your boundaries, people understand and it's a non-negotiable and people see the value in that.
Absolutely. And when it comes to I will say the business and the personal side because there's been so many times where I've said yes to things that I didn't really want to say yes to, and it translated to me saying no to something for myself. And this comes down a lot with clients when people I work with a lot of girls where they'll say, like, I'm overbooked. I'm like working these 14-hour days, which I'm sure we've all done at some point. And like I tell them too, I'm like, when you don't have these boundaries on like the hours that you work and how many clients you can physically and mentally take, you're taking not only away from you, but you're taking away from the experience of the clients that you're adding on because you're not going to show up as your best self. You're not going to be happy and fulfilled and excited to see them and give them the best service. So it's like you're taking away from you and them because you're tired. And I always like that like perspective switch because it's not fair to either of you at that point. So why are you pushing yourself there?
Right. I love that you say that because actually one of my clients brought this to my attention recently and she was like, "You know what I love about our appointments is that it's never just an appointment. Like I always leave here with some insight. I always leave here with something, like it and I really like to talk to my clients. I'm a talker during a last appointment. Like you can fall asleep if you want, but I like to talk. So I feel like a lot of my clients and me, we get into really like in-depth conversations and I feel like previously, like, when I was working, like, those 14-hour days, like, I was not talking. I was like, "Turn the music on, go to sleep." But it's different. You really get to, like, nourish the relationship with the client, and there's definitely a difference in price point between my prices now and my prices then. So it really does make a difference when you're, like, setting boundaries and then also providing an experience.
Absolutely, and it's funny because I just did a stitch to this video about this article that came out on TikTok, and I stitched it because it was saying how hairstylists are like, their mental health like, they were having mental health problems 45% more or something this past year because of, like, the trauma dumping from clients. And I think that I see it in the beauty industry too. When you had a client for a long time, they're telling you a lot of stuff. And like, I'm sure you've had it too when I like to talk to my clients and I've had some of them for 8 years where like they're telling me like deep shit where I'm just like, okay, I'm happy to be able to do that and have that as part of the experience and then be like, feel like they have a safe space. But I can only handle so much of that, right? I can only internally take that on because I'm so like, I have so much empathy and I carry people's emotions that I have to have a max on how much of that a day I can handle too. And so that's another thing. If you're taking these long ass days and everybody's having a shit week and they're trauma dumping on you, you're going to feel super exhausted just from listening to it.
I agree completely. I feel like there's this one thing When I was, like, maybe 19, I remember I was, like, looking up how to just decompress from talking to clients all day, and one thing that I do when I get off of work is I really try to, like, close my eyes and, like, just imagine me, like, releasing my cords is what I call it. Because whatever happened in that room stays in that room, like, I'm on to my next adventure, like, clear energy, clear everything.
I love that. I've heard that where people do, I can't remember what it was called, but it was Emily Lywood when I had her on the podcast, or I was actually when I was on her podcast, we talked about this. But she was saying at night she does like this 5-minute routine where she like does that, close her eyes and like imagines like the cords being cut of like any of the stresses that day and stuff. I'm like, that is so smart. And I think that's why beauty service providers love our 5 minutes of silence in the car, like when we leave. Okay, so maintaining personal growth involves consistent practices. Of course, it's not something that you just work on for a little bit and then like you're good to go and you're just in this amazing space all the time. Do you have any like daily routines or practices for you to sustain this confidence, your confidence journey?
One of the first things that I do when I wake up is my morning journal, and I know that's kind of everybody's typical personal development hack, but it really is one of those things that I make a non-negotiable, not as much now as when I first started. When I first started, the things that I was kind of giving myself to start building this relationship with myself were non-negotiables. I can go this week without doing a journal for a few days and I'll be okay. I'll hop on it when I'm ready, you know? But when I first started, it was really a non-negotiable for me to prioritize myself. So like knowing what your non-negotiables are and like I feel like for a while during that time, I remember like the lock screen on my phone was like a list of my non-negotiables. First one being a daily journal. And the reason that the daily journal was and still to this day is one of my like first things is because it's not very often that I get to, see myself like everybody gets to see you, everybody gets to talk to you. So it's like my time to like see me and talk to me. One of the first questions on my journal is what do I want to feel today? And I always kind of interpret that question as like, what do I want to feel today? It's my check-in with myself. It's my like, hey, you're rested. Like, what could you use from today? And I feel like I checked in with myself. I feel like I prioritize myself and I like that. I love that. I really try to like lean into the things that I love and I feel like I love me. So I really try to like emphasize what does Amalia need today? And I feel like when you find out what's your feel good, it's easier for you to like have non-negotiables.
Do you feel like now, like you said, you can not journal for a week and you'll be fine? Do you feel like you kind of mentally check in now because it's a habit that you were writing it out every day? Do you feel like in the morning, even if you're not journaling, you're kind of mentally checking, like, how do I want to feel today? And like answering it that way instead, even if you're not journaling?
Yeah, I do. I feel like especially, like, when I'm, like, washing my face, brushing my teeth, doing that kinda thing, like, "What do you need today?" Like, what a big thing for me too is, like, if I don't do a journal, 10 out of 10, I'm probably doing a gratitude list because it's easier for me to do when I'm on the way anywhere. If I'm driving somewhere, I'm, like, out loud, I'm like, "I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for my legs, I'm grateful for my body." Like, even if I don't have a chance to check in with myself, I have the chance to check in with how grateful I am to have the things that I do, and I feel like that's just as good of a check-in as anything else.
Since I've never really gotten into journaling, I'm curious. Do you write how you're feeling, like how your day was? Like, what do you write every morning?
Well, my typical morning journal, so I have 2 journals. My morning journal and then just kinda like my free game journal, but my morning journal is really just like setting the intent for the day. What do I wanna feel today? What are my affirmations for the day? What am I grateful for? And then usually in alignment with what I wanna feel today is what I will do to feel those things, and then the last one is 3 actions that will, like, align me to, like, doing those things. So it's kinda like a game plan for, like, what I wanna feel and then how to get there, basically. That's my morning journal.
Okay, cool. Do you have a specific journal that you use that has all those prompts for you, or do you just write that
I
out?
have my own, so I kinda made my own on Canva. I'm an iPad girly, so I like to, like, download, like, a whole bunch of my Canva things and upload them into my iPad, so that's kinda how I do it. I also have, like, a freestyle journal where, like, yeah, sometimes I'm like I'm still a diary kid, so I'm like, "Hi, today is September," and I just kinda brainstorm. Sometimes you need it, I feel like sometimes when you have so many thoughts or you had a long day, it's good to, like, brain spill, I call it, so I
Yeah.
like to have those too.
I think those are cool. I found, like I was actually just a couple weeks ago, I remember when all the closures happened, I was like, "I'm gonna journal every day, like, about what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing," and I did it for, like, 2 days, right? But and then I got off the habit and forgot about it. But it was kind of funny because even a couple weeks ago, I was cleaning out some stuff. I found it and just reading those back, I was like, that is so crazy. Just even seeing like where I was 3 years ago and like where my headspace was and what was going on. So that's what's always intrigued me too about keeping a journal. It's just so you can kind of look back because I think life is so busy that unless it's documented on our phones, it's like, how was I feeling during this time? Like, I don't know, you know?
I like that. I actually used to be before I was, like, consistent with my journaling, I was, like, one of those photo booth video diaries. So I have a whole bunch of, like, video diaries from, like, my life a year ago, and they're, like, fun to watch. And it's interesting, like, kinda how I was saying earlier, like, we don't ever really get to, like, see ourselves other than, like, looking in the mirror, you know? So I remember one time my friend, like, showed me a video of me talking, and I was like, "Oh my god, I wanna hug her." Like, I love that.
I love that too. I started putting a photo of myself. I think I'm like 5 or 6 in this photo in my mirror in my bathroom. And just, like, looking at that girl and being like, "Wow, I love her," and, like, why would I say anything mean to that little girl, like, when I'm feeling like I'm wanting to be mean to myself or whatever, and that was something that really helped me, and then also too, last November, I had started getting really consistent. I feel like that's when my true, like, self-love journey started beginning because I started getting really consistent, and I was like, I'd gained weight, I was, like, the heaviest that I'd been in a long time, I was out of this really toxic relationship, and just kinda trying to, like, find myself again, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna start this weight loss journey, I just wanna get back." I was always, like, in the gym, but I was never super like, I was pretty consistent, but I think I was more, like, with alcohol and all that kinda stuff, just not being healthy. And I was like, "Okay, I wanna get on this journey." And now even, like, looking back at the pictures from when I started, I remember when I first took those before pictures, I, like, hated myself so much, and I was like, "Oh my god, I look disgusting, like, how did I even get here? Like, I didn't even feel good or anything." And then looking back, I didn't even wanna take progress photos because I was like, "I never wanna see that photo again." But looking back now that I can compare those 2, I had to look and be like, "Actually, that girl's the best because she's the one who made the decision to get me to where I am now." And, like, actually looking at her and looking at myself, like, almost a year ago with, like, love and empathy and, like, being proud too because I'm like, if she didn't make the decision to change, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I think that's something that a lot of people can take with any part of their life, whether it's the beginning, they're starting their business and they're like their first set of lashes and they're like, "These freaking suck," right? They took me 6 hours, but it's like looking back and actually having love and respect for that person and who you were instead of just, like, looking at it hateful, you know?
I feel like one thing that I've always really lived by is you can't hate yourself into a version of you love. Like, you cannot. There is absolutely no way you're showing up for someone you hate. You have to love yourself through it. I have all these little like quotes that I like to live by, and they stay at like the forefront of my brain, but like only through compassion do people allow themselves to see the truth. When I was kind of hitting like my burnout, I was like, no, I could keep going. I could keep going. Like, my parents raised me to be strong. Like, I'm supposed to be a fighter. And then I remember just sitting there like, no, she needs a hug. She needs a hug. This is how we're gonna see it through.
I wanna ask you too if there's any areas that you feel like you still encounter struggles, and if you do, like, what are your kinda steps of overcoming these to keep progressing?
I have days that are harder than others, and I feel like sometimes I can tend to overthink. That's something I struggle with. So I feel like when it comes to overthinking, movement has been my best friend. I started going to the gym like 2 years ago, and that has also played a big part in like my personal development journey. A big thing that I've really worked on this year is really like trying to like I don't wanna say shut the ego down, but yeah, shut the ego down. Like, a lot of the times I have to ask myself, who's speaking? Like, is it my higher self? Is it my ego? And sometimes I go back and forth with when do I need compassion and when do I need discipline? Because sometimes, depending on the situation, one of them, but not both of them all the time, depending on how I'm feeling.
Yeah, that's such a good point because I definitely there's been times I think a lot of us can be like, whether you're upset or anything where it's like, "Am I in my ego right now? Like, are my feelings just a little hurt?" You know? That's really good, and movement has been huge for me. I feel like I'm also an overthinker, and I feel like I overthink and then I freeze, and I just don't do anything. I just kinda shut down and just kinda disassociate when I'm just like, "Okay, this is too much," like, shutting down. And that's something that I feel like obviously is not a healthy coping mechanism. And the movement really helped where like when I'm feeling like that, I'm like, okay, I just need to go for a walk. I need to plug in a podcast and just like even go walk. It doesn't even have to be this huge like workout, even though that is sometimes what it is too. And that's something that really helps me get out of that and not just like freeze and then not do anything.
It wasn't until this year that, like, I really understood, like, what a difference it makes to move your body, and, like, not even weightlifting, like, yeah, like, even just going on a walk, like, kinda how you're talking about, like, disassociation, like, I would kinda do that too. I feel like I kinda used to, like, really get lost in work, and I would just kinda try to ignore everything else. But then it's
Mhm.
like, sometimes when we're in that, like, freeze state, it's like moving your body makes all of the difference. I always see it through with some movement.
And it's like every time, even when I don't wanna go and I'm like, "Oh, I just don't even wanna get out of bed, I don't wanna go for a walk." Once I'm done, there's never been one time where I'm like, "That wasn't worth it." Every time it feels good, I feel better, I feel less stressed, and I'll be honest too, especially as I feel like people in the beauty industry and a lot of us are really creative. When we get in those creative ruts, the movement is what helps me get out of those, like, creative ruts, and it's like, that's why I have so many notes apps on my phone because it's like I'm at the gym and these ideas or just popping into my head as I'm working out of just like, "Oh, this is a good thing to post. This is a good TikTok. Oh, this is a good podcast episode," of just like these random ideas just start popping in my head. And so that's something too where I'm like, "No, I need this. I need to like get out of the day-to-day work life and get into something else for that creative spark to come back." I want to talk to you because you have a masterclass. And so do you want to kind of share what is covered there, how people can find you and connect with that? Because I'm sure in your master classes, you do you bring in some of, like, the self-development stuff with the business?
I do. So the building a business masterclass actually is like 70% self like development and like 30% actually building a business.
Mm.
The building a business masterclass is basically helping anyone who's either in business or looking to build a business really anchor the foundations in themselves. One of the first exercises we learn in the building a business masterclass is learning your core values. I feel like that's really important when it comes to building a business and just having a relationship with yourself. One of the second things we go over is kind of how I was talking about earlier of like your business is an extension of you, it's not your whole being. So that's kind of more what the building a business masterclass is. It's a lot more internal work, like self work, than it is actually building a business.
And that is over 3 days, or what is, like, the time commitment?
Yes, it's 3 calls.
Oh, 3 calls. Okay, cool. So, yeah, I'm gonna have it linked inside of the show notes of this episode, so that way you guys can check it out. And is that your free masterclass?
Correct.
Okay, guys, you have to go check it out then, like, it's free. And do you offer, like, one-on-one coaching? What other, coaching services do you have?
I currently offer one on one for the building a business. And then I also offer a one on one coaching, which is also called her. So that's more of kind of just tapping inward a little more. No business on that coaching call.
I love that, and I love how much we've talked about how much, like, the personal side and your personal relationship, it really does translate into your business, and that, like, you do need to have a solid foundation there for business as well.
I feel like a lot of people, like, kinda get excited when I talk about this, but, like, the decision for, like, closing down my storefront was a really big thing to a lot of people. Like, a lot of people were like, "What? You're thinking about closing your store?" And, like, I really had to, like, anchor that relationship with myself to know that, like, "Hey, like, you can do this big thing and move forward, and it's gonna be okay." Like, it doesn't take away from, like, what you've done, who you are, what you've made. Like, you can start again. Like, it's in you, it's not external.
It's so funny, you just sparked a memory. My dad I was on a, like, a family vacation this summer, and my dad was saying he's also a business owner, he does construction, and so I feel like my entrepreneur spirit has been there since I was little. I've always been like, "I wanna be my own boss." I never knew what I wanted to do, I just knew when I was little, and they'd be like, "What do you wanna be when you grow up?" And I'm like, "My own boss, that's it." So, it was funny though, because I never had realized and I think it's a generational thing too, where he was like, "Yeah, it's" he's like, "I'm so proud of you and I'm so inspired by you because, like, I used to do lash trainings where I was training for a company." And he was like, "You just, like, cut that off, like, when you were done doing it because it didn't, like, serve you anymore." And, like, he's like, "You said goodbye to a lot of money that you didn't know if you were gonna make back or, you were gonna supplement elsewhere." And, there's been a couple things in my career where I've done the training, stepped away from that, had clients, took certain services away because it no longer aligned. And it kind of like opened my eyes where I was like, yeah, actually that is kind of cool to be able to trust yourself and be like, okay, it's okay. We're taking away like this, but we're moving on to something different and that's more aligned. And I can see in like my dad's generation, it's very like you stick with what you have and you don't like make changes, you don't make sacrifices, you don't jump when it's really scary because of the unknown. And I do think that's something that I'm proud of myself for being able to do, and it's funny because I get a lot of pushback from people. They're like, "Well, why? Like, wait, why what are you gonna do?" And I'm like, I'll figure it out." So, it's just I don't know, it's kind of funny to, like, think about that, and that kinda sparked a memory there because he was just I never realized how shocked he was where he's like, "It's crazy, you were making really good money with training," and then you're like, "Yeah, I'm done training."
I love that because it really shows, like, how much you really, like, trust and believe in yourself to be able to, like, make a decision like that.
Yeah, and it definitely didn't happen, like, overnight. It's something that I stuck with things for way longer than I should have, relationships as well, knowing deep in my core that it was not intended and fulfilling for me, and I think that, honestly, I do feel like when that relationship ended and it wasn't as scary as I thought it was gonna be of, like, "What am I without this person?" that I did gain a lot of trust in myself on well, okay, so I can end other things. It's not always bad. I wish I had this book. It's like 101 essays that will change the way you think. And there's this one that I always reference, but it's like fear doesn't mean something bad. Like it doesn't mean just the word bad. Fear can actually be good and it can be exciting. And that means that you're like wanting to try something different. And so that was something too. I'm like, even if I'm fearful, it doesn't mean that that's like impending doom. You're a little excited, you know?
I love that. It's all about perspective.
Yes, for sure. Well, this has been such a wonderful chat. I'm so excited we were finally able to get you on the podcast. But where can people find you? I know you made a new TikTok account recently too. So where can people find you on Instagram, on TikTok, all of the things so they can follow your journey?
They're all the same under Wingstetics with 2 S's. They're all Instagram, TikTok. Those are the only 2 I'm on, so Instagram and TikTok.
Awesome. And once again, I'll have them linked in the show notes along with your masterclass. But thank you so much for coming on. And I'm super excited for people to listen to this episode.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.